Hey everybody, Dr. Diane, libido expert here, and in this particular video, we're going to be talking about how to know if you have low libido. Now, this is a really common question I hear is, how do I even know if my libido is low? So we're going to talk about this in relationship to, from a diagnostic perspective, like what the medical community will say about low libido and how do you know if you have it. And then we're going to talk about how to answer that question from a impact standpoint, from how your sexuality, how intimacy, how your intimate life is actually related to health in general. So low libido is not a true diagnosis. The true diagnosis in medicine is called hypoactive sexual desire disorder, which basically says that you have to have a low sex drive for 6 months. Obviously, that is subjective on what a low sex drive is, but the medical community will say, hey, this is actually a disorder, this is a quote unquote disease, if it's been going on for 6 months. So that's one thing to consider. But secondly, how do you even know what low is, what normal is? And 6 months, frankly, is a really long time when we think about the impact on health. So when we're talking about sexuality and we're talking about drive and we're talking about libido, one of the things to also understand is the impact that sexuality has on our health. When we are intimate, we are releasing a lot of a hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is released when we touch, when we cuddle, when we actually reach climax. Therefore, throughout the entire intimate process, we are releasing oxytocin. It's not just that climax. And if you can't climax, you still get oxytocin released throughout your experience, throughout your intimate experience. So all of this being said, what does oxytocin do for the body? And this is related to the overarching theme. This question of what does oxytocin do to the body or do for the body is related to our overarching theme of how do I know if my libido is low? Oxytocin will do a lot for the body. Oxytocin helps us regulate our sleep. Oxytocin helps us feel less anxious. Oxytocin helps regulate our moods. It helps regulate our hormones. One of the most important hormones that oxytocin helps us regulate is cortisol, our stress hormone. And there's so much talk about cortisol and belly fat and cortisol and blood sugar and cortisol and stress. We absolutely need the hormone cortisol for life to survive. It provides us energy. So cortisol in the right amount is great, but what happens is so many of us are stressed, we're overwhelmed, we're multitasking, we're going through society at this really, really fast pace. Guess what helps you to modulate all that stress? Guess what helps to regulate that cortisol hormone? Oxytocin. So that brings us back to our question of how much is enough? How do I know if my libido is low? So generally, I would recommend for most people that they are getting an oxytocin burst at least a couple times a week, right? So if you are feeling that your drive for intimacy is not at that level, then you definitely want to consider going into finding the root causes. And we talk about the root causes for low libido in another video. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if this is helpful information. Look at some of the other videos. We'll go through some of these other, topics. Leave comments on what you want to talk about. But the biggest thing to really understand is if you are not intimate twice a week, especially if you have a partner to be intimate with. We'll talk about what to do if you don't have a partner, also in another video. But if you have a partner to be intimate with and you're like, wow, my libido's so low, or your libido's so low that you're not self-pleasuring, and there's a lot of medical information on self-pleasuring. So if you're finding that your libido is so low that you're not participating in self-pleasure or you're not engaging intimately at least twice a week, I would say that that is a low libido from the standpoint and from the lens of what is optimum, right? So we wanted to consider what is optimum and what is not. And so yes, if you are, having a intimate experience on a monthly basis, the medical community might say like, hey, this isn't necessarily diagnostic. But what I'm interested in helping you is to get you to the optimum health. And oxytocin being this key regulatory hormone that is released in our intimate experiences is so important to get on a regular basis. If you can get this hormone into your bloodstream, more than twice a week, that's even better, but at least twice a week to really help you to modulate and to handle all the stress in the world. It's amazing what this hormone can do to help our brain function better, to combat overwhelm, to help us sleep better, to help us stress better, to help us have better hormonal balance and more. So it's a huge help for so many components of life. So that's hopefully answers to your questions on how do I know if my libido is low. Please do subscribe to this channel if this is helpful information. Information is below on how we help women with low libido. And please do leave your questions in the comments because I will use that to continue to generate content that is most serving to you. Again, I'm Dr. Diane. We'll see you next time.